Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this special video edition on election night of Deep Background, the Stars podcast. I'm Dave Helling with the Kansas City Stars editorial board. And joining me tonight to analyze and take a look at the votes as they come in and tell folks what they think is happening or not happening is my friend and colleague, John Shorman. John, great to have you with us here at 7 o'clock. Yeah, well, the polls just closed in Missouri. Almost all of the polls in Kansas. There are a few mountain time counties out west. So we don't have returns to talk about, John, but let's talk about what we're watching for. Where do the clues come from? Let's start in Missouri. If you're Nicole Galloway, what do you think you're looking at tonight to see if you're overperforming or doing better than perhaps you expected to against Mike Parson?
So, yeah, I think if you're Nicole Galloway, you are especially curious in some of our the major cities and some of the suburban areas around Kansas City and St. Louis. You need a very significant, great turnout in those areas, areas that are going to be Democratic leaning, but you really need to run up the score in some of those areas to be competitive once these rural returns start coming in. I think the other thing you want to watch for is in some of these more rural areas of Missouri, is Parson running behind, say, Eric Greitens in 2016 at all? Is Trump's support a little bit softer in some of those rural areas? Those are things that might give or be a few hopeful signs for Nicole Galloway tonight.
I'm trying to keep my eye on Missouri 2, the second district over by St. Louis, because they've got a hyper-competitive congressional race there, Jonathan, as you know, between Jill Shoup, the Democrat, and the incumbent Ann Wagner. Right. And it's sort of the classic suburban St. Louis County district. For viewers in our area, it's very much like the 3rd district in Kansas, only in Missouri. And so if there are to be inroads for the Democrats, John, you would think it would happen there. And if it would happen for Jill Shoup, maybe there's an advantage for Galloway. If she doesn't do well there, she doesn't have much of a shot, do you think?
Yeah, I think, the kind of people that are going to be voting for Jill Shoup, the areas of support that are going to be coming out for Jill Shoup are obviously going to have to be areas of support for Nicole Galloway if she wants to be a competitive statewide. Again, I think she really just absolutely needs fantastic turnout in these urban, suburban areas.
Let's talk about Kansas now for a few minutes and that big Senate race between Barb Bollier and Roger Marshall. Again, no returns yet. We won't have those until our next report at 9 o'clock. But again, what's the 30,000-foot look here, Jonathan? Is it Johnson County? Is it Sedgwick County down around Wichita? Is it Shawnee County in Topeka? Where are we looking for Barb Bollier to show strength that would cause problems for Roger Marshall? And of course, conversely, that Roger Marshall is safer than maybe we estimated a few weeks ago.
Right. So I would keep a really close eye on Sedgwick County and the Wichita area tonight. Everyone expects in the 3rd congressional district, Wyandotte County, Johnson County, especially Barbara Bollier's home turf, she's going to do well. I think the degree to which she does well, especially in Johnson County, the more she can kind of overperform in Johnson County, that gives her that's just that many more votes that will help offset if Sedgwick County, that Wichita core is a little bit more competitive. Certainly, the rural areas of the state, the 1st district, Marshall is expected to perform very well in those areas. So I would really pay a lot of attention to Sedgwick County, Wichita, because I think that's where you're going to get an indication of how the night is going for either candidate. Certainly in 2018, Laura Kelly, who won the Democratic governor, who won statewide, performed well in that area. And I think Barbara Bollier would also need to do well there.
I did some homework today and took a look at the Johnson County number for Laura Kelly back in 2018. She did about 55% in Johnson County. But Chris Kobach only did 38%. You remember Greg Orman was a factor in that race, took some votes. So she won Johnson County by 17 points, did Laura Kelly. And John, that was her whole margin. Basically, Kobach and Kelly were even in the rest of the state, but she did so well here. You would guess, wouldn't you, that Barb Bollier at least needs to do 17 or 18 points better than Roger Marshall in Johnson County. It's her home county. Turnout has been huge. I mean, if she wins by 9 or 10 points in Johnson County, that's just not going to be enough.
Yeah, I mean, a blow. I don't know exactly what the percentage is going to need to be, but certainly a blowout win in Johnson County would be critical for Bollier.
What kind of campaign do you think both have run?
I think it's been certainly very aggressive on both sides. And you have to keep in mind, even if Bollier ultimately does not win tonight, it's very likely that, or very possible rather, that this could end up still being the most competitive U.S. Senate race in Kansas in decades, probably going back to one of Bob Dole's early election campaigns, maybe that first re-election campaign. But so, I mean, either way, that just speaks to how different this cycle was than from what we typically see with U.S. Senate in Kansas, where you have campaigns that are not particularly competitive. This was the total opposite of that. And having covered a few cycles in Kansas now, you know, this certainly reminded me more of even a governor's race in kind of the tone and the tenor of the sense that it could go either way, which is not usually something you see here in Kansas.
And we can talk about this later too, but you get the macro sense, I do anyway, that Kansas continues this interesting purple drift away from the sort of rock rib Republicanism, no matter what happens tonight, particularly because of suburban counties like Johnson County and a little bit in Sedgwick and Topeka for that matter, in which the sort of younger professional people tend to be trending more Democratic now than, say, in Missouri, which seems to be trending redder and redder all the time. In fact, in ways, Missouri is arguably redder than Kansas. You know, we don't expect any of the statewide in Missouri to be competitive really for Democrats tonight, other than Nicole Galloway potentially. And yet here you have a Democratic governor in Kansas, John. You've got a Bollier at least competitive. Sharice Davids, we do expect to win tonight. So the macro view is that there are some interesting things happening in both states in opposite directions.
Yeah, I don't want to overstate the purplification of Kansas, if you will, but there is a very threereal phenomenon that's been happening the last few cycles in Johnson County in the 3rd district, where some of these areas are turning purple, and I think it's we'll see what the Bollier vote count is in Johnson County tonight, and as well as some of the state legislative houses, House seats and Senate seats have the potential to kind of go Democratic in Johnson County. But I think it'd probably be fairly safe to say that Johnson County is kind of a new front, if you will, for Democrats in Kansas that really did not exist in the same way even a decade ago.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, of course, is to see whether that trend is semi-permanent or whether it's just a flash related to the Donald Trump presidency, which has been a problem in every suburban community around the country, and we're seeing that tonight. Okay, one final question, observation. A reminder, by the way, we'll be back at 9. At that point, we will have results in both states. We'll have a good sense, a better sense of where the trends are potentially, and we'll talk about those. Have you seen anything in the presidential returns that are a surprise to you, John, at this point, or anything from which we can draw a lesson about Kansas and Missouri? You know, people tend to think of Pennsylvania or North Carolina as isolated votes, but what happens in Pennsylvania may have an implication for Kansas and Missouri as well, and other states. Anything that catches your eye, or is this unfolding about the way we thought it would?
Right. I think obviously very early returns so far in the presidential race. There's a lot of attention in social media on Twitter right now on the state of Florida. I would kind of caution against over-interpreting what's happening in Florida.
Tell people what's happening in Florida.
Well,
it looks like Trump is ahead there.
Yeah, you have Florida counts votes really fast. They're really great at that, despite what happened in 2000.
Yeah. Or it can take a month, depending.
Yeah. So, but there are some areas of Florida where if you were going if you were hoping for a Joe Biden victory in that state, Trump is kind of overperforming. Miami-Dade comes to mind. And there are, just some dynamics. Florida is a toss-up state. There's some dynamics in Florida that really just don't necessarily translate well to the rest of the country. So regardless of what the outcome is there, I would kind of just a fair warning to viewers not to overinterpret what happens in Florida and apply that to the rest.
The turnout in our region has been enormous, as you know, may set some records, 75, 80%, John. What does that say? I mean, does that help either presidential candidate? Does that change the math in any way that so many people have voted so early? I mean, it's really astonishing when you look at a 75 or 80% or 85% turnout in some counties.
Right. So I actually have another computer where I have pulled up the advance voting statistics from Kansas as of earlier 8 a.m. today. That's obviously changed since then. But in you can kind of see advance mail balloting in Kansas favoring, and this is interesting to me, favoring Democrats, but the advance in-person voting in Kansas so far favoring Republicans. So, I think both parties have turned out more in Kansas, at least this year. It's harder to kind of gauge where things are falling in Missouri because, of course, Missouri doesn't have a party registration in the same way as Kansas does. But I think, I would personally expect that going forward, even let's hope 4 years from now, the coronavirus pandemic will not be we won't be, having to walk around worrying about it. But I do think, this is going to change how we think of elections going forward, that the advanced voting part of the election will just be a much more prominent feature. And campaigns are going to have to adjust accordingly because, you're really messaging that you might have been able to put out right up into election day. You might want to rethink that because you'll have to account for all of those voters who are going to be advanced voting.
Yeah, the genie is really out of the bottle on that. I mean, people like to vote early. They like the convenience of mail ballots. The idea of going to the polls on election day is really not highly popular, as we've seen today, except for some people, obviously. But for most people, the convenience of it is important. And it does, I think, change campaigns going forward. And it'll also change how governments have to work harder to make voting more of a month-long procedure rather than just a couple of days or a couple of weeks. That's a subject, of course, for another day. Okay, a reminder, we'll be back at 9 o'clock right here at kansascity.com, and we'll have returns from both states to analyze and take a look at. We should have a better sense of where these elections are going. We may have a better sense of what the presidential campaigns look like. We'll have some issues. We'll have a good long discussion, and we'll take your comments too here at kansascity.com and maybe respond to questions or observations that you might have. So tell your friends if you want to hear discussion, good quality discussion of the Kansas and Missouri races. Join us here at 9 o'clock tonight right here at kansascity.com. Jonathan, thanks. We'll see you in a couple of hours, and we'll have some more things to talk about. I'm Dave Helling with the Stars editorial board, and you've been on Deep Background.